And then there's a bunch of steps. There's 12 of them, right? And in there, I don't know if you know anything about them, but there's a lot of things that you have to do, a lot of writing. You have to like, go back, you have to like admit your faults. You have to like find out what your character defects and shortcomings are. You have to like make a list of people that you had harmed. You have to go to all those people and apologize for your actions and ask them what you can do to make it right. And some of those people are like, fuck you. I never want to see you again. Don't even call me.
Hey y'all, what's going on? Welcome back to the Stacking Days podcast, where we highlight underrepresented journeys of sobriety. Again, as always, I'm your host, Ray Donovan, and I'm really looking forward to our episode today. We got a brother joining us that, we've been kind of playing tag back and forth on Instagram for seemingly, at least a couple months at this point, which is not surprising because he's extremely busy. So, let's not take anything away from him, but super glad that we finally got Jamil with us today to share his journey. And I think it's going to be a good one. So hopefully you guys stick around. Jamil, what's up, man? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really grateful. Yeah, I know we've been going back and forth a little bit and we made some plans to get this done earlier before the end of the year, but it didn't happen, but here we are.
It's all good, man. You gotta be flexible in life, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, look, man. Let's start at the beginning. Let's get all the way back to the root of your story, your journey, your relationship with alcohol, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I'll share a little bit of like, what it was like for me in the beginning, So I think I was telling you earlier, I'm a first generation American. My parents came here from Pakistan in the early 70s to go to school. And they got married, and I'm the youngest of four, so yeah, I'm the baby of the family. All my siblings, there's quite a big of an age difference, and my growing up, my life was pretty good. Except for the fact that my father was actually an alcoholic as well. I didn't really get to see that until like my transition years from being a young kid to a young adult, a teenager, right? And so during that time, I used to always know that at night my dad acted different.
Mm,
And my dad he was very highly educated, high performing guy, but the booze, they really they got he was a blackout drinker for the most part.
right.
And so at night, he would always drink in excess, and very verbally abusive and things like that, right? And there's like vivid moments of my life that I remember were like, I guess you could say kind of traumatic. Like my dad, there was a time when I remember my dad picked me up from school, and he was wasted. And he went to take me home, and instead of and pulling into the driveway, I think his like he didn't hit the brakes, and he hit the gas instead. So we drove into the home,
Oh,
and
geez.
I remember being like in the back seat, and I remember just like plowing into like the house and into like the living room, and I just remember like being like, what the fuck? And he was a general contractor. He was an
Okay.
engineer by trade. And so he just like closed the garage, and then like the next day, like his construction crew was like at the house fixing everything.
That's
And
convenient, right?
and I remember them sitting me down and telling me that I had to talk to the insurance adjuster and tell them that I was trying to park my dad's car into the
Mm,
driveway. And I didn't really know that like what I was doing was wrong at the time, but I just did it. And long story short, things got fixed, and this was in like, this was in the mid '90s. This was a long time ago, and so that was like kind of the tipping point that I realized that I think my dad had a problem. But I never thought in a million years that I would be just like him and probably worse, right?
hmm
And so but my dad did find the solution. He ended up going to a 12-step program, and he got sober. And shortly after he got sober in like 1998, he got cancer, and he got terminal cancer, stage 4 cancer. And he was under chemo, and then it ended up not, he fought for a long time, but in like 2001 he was basically put on hospice, and they said that it was just a matter of days. And so, in August of 2001 my dad passed away, and I got to see, a very, you know um high performing, high energy guy just, kind of diminish, and die on hospice, and so, that was, traumatizing at the time, and I was young. I was like 15, 16 years old.
Mm.
But mind you, through that whole process of him, being sick and, drinking and things like that, I had started to experiment in drinking myself, right? So I think I kind of shared a little bit earlier with you that I basically had my first drunk when when I was 12 years old. And I basically ended up, um just I remember what it was. I remember it was Irish Mist, and it was Wild Turkey, and
Okay.
I think that if you're an alcoholic, you'll
Yeah.
remember your first drunk,
Yeah.
and those are pretty hardcore drinks right there. And so I remember that it made me very, very sick, but there was something about it that made me want to do it again, And I
Hmm.
think that, if people that have been in a 12-step program, they talk about that obsession of the mind and the allergy of the body, and I think that that's really when the obsession kicked off for me, and so, you know, um, through high after my dad passed away, through high school, I kind of I was just a partier, and I'm sure if you remember, I don't know how old you are, but I remember, in we're not that far apart in age. I remember
Probably
there were
not.
a lot of there were like keggers a lot in high school, like
Mm.
keg parties. And I remember on the weekends, I used to really, 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 really get drunk, and that was like my existence, that was like my identity. I was a partier. And one thing led to another, and experimenting with all kinds of other stuff, and so, I kind of never really left that lifestyle, and after high school, it kind of progressed. I didn't really know um, too much about what I wanted to do with my life, right? But I knew that I really, really liked the effects produced by drugs and alcohol, preferably alcohol first, and then everything else that came after it, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so it just kind of got progressively worse for me, and I had these jobs that I was constantly doing, but I really had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, And when I turned 21, let me back up a second, just so that you kind of have an idea of why I drank so excessively. After my dad had passed away, I was kind of always looking for like a father figure type thing, and I never really had that. And so when my dad was sick, and shortly after he passed away, I had my best friend's dad was like kind of filled that void. He was like a really, really good guy, and he wasn't an alcoholic. He was just a really good dude, And like I looked up to him, and he was like that. He filled that kind of that father figure role for me. He gave me a job when I turned 16. I was my first job. I was a janitor at a private airport. Their family owned the airport, and he's just a really good guy, and then, one day he just went to go test fly a plane, and the plane went down, and he died.
Oh, shoot.
So now I have two people that I'm very close to that passed away, and I'm just kind of wondering to myself, like, I wonder why God keeps taking all these people away from me that are close to me, And so I remember during that moment, I remember that was the first time. I was like 17 years old, and I remember that was the first time in my life that I drank to make the feeling of how I felt go away,
Right.
And then, I shortly after that, I barely graduated high school, and just because I was just partying all the time, And I remember my mom had sent. My mom was a single mom at the time. Obviously, now she had sent me to Pakistan to like try to find myself, and I went to go live with my uncle in like this third world country, and
Yeah.
I'm an American, but and it's just very, very weird. And I came back and I still didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. So I started working in construction, and I worked for this guy who was like another father figure. He was my dad's friend. He was this multimillionaire, older white guy, and he was just like a good dude, and he like, kind of taught me how to be a man. He taught me the value of a dollar, and he taught me like the value of hard work. But I fucked that off all the time because I was always going late to work. I wouldn't show up. Like, it was just like I was just a bad example. And then one day, my mom came home and she was like, "Hey, have you ever thought about being a cop?" And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Yeah, there's the state of California, the Department of Corrections is hiring, and they pay really good. And back then, like their starting salary for like a CO was like $76,000." And I thought to myself, I'm like, I never really per se been in trouble for the things that I've done, but the lifestyle isn't like very copacetic to like what I was trying to get into.
Yeah.
But I applied, and I got in, and I was actually, and I started doing all the tests, and I started like, and the next thing I know, I got an academy date. And so now I'm like, okay, great, I'm gonna get out of construction. I don't have to work for a living like this anymore. So I went to the academy, I became a cop, and they put me on my first assignment. I was on a level 4 prison yard in California. And for those people that don't know what that is, it's the maximum security prison yard in the state of California, and it is a fucking very violent place. And you'll see more blood there than you would ever want to see, and violence. And I was 21. I turned 22 in the academy, so I got to my first institution, and I was like 125 pounds, and I was just literally stuck on in a prison yard with a bunch of warriors and gangbangers, and it was crazy. And that
Mm.
lifestyle was just absolutely chaotic. You would go to work every day. You didn't really know if you were going to make it out of there.
Mm.
Um, and I just kind of like, I got, I became a victim of my environment. I mean, a victim, like a person of my environment. Right. And I just kind of, I just started seeing a lot of violence, a lot of stabbings, a lot of death, just a lot of things that, normal people don't normally see on a daily basis. And
Yeah.
I just kind of became a very, unemotional, dark, jaded person. And I used to like to drink and party before I became into that line of work. So that kind of fueled it. And then like the ego and the pride and all that type of the arrogance that comes along with, you know, um, being an alcoholic, and then, that line of work, there's, law enforcement is a very honorable, respectable job, but cops also have a very bad reputation. And and I'll be honest, the person that I was when I worked in that line of work, um, I was an egomaniac, and I thought I was better than people,
Mm.
and I thought that, society had deemed me to be held to this high standard of being a peace officer, and everybody that I came in contact with was less than me.
Mm.
And and I just kind of ran with that for a long time, and my drinking just kind of got progressively worse. My days off would consist of just drinking, and you know trying to party, and a lot of times, I didn't I wouldn't always try. I would always try to get 3 days off, so I wouldn't. I knew on my Monday it would be tough for me to get to work, and I just witnessed way more violence than a person should see, and in my mind, I categorized it as, if you saw and you did the things that I did on a daily basis, you would drink too.
Mm-hmm.
And who is anyone to tell me anything? And and so, I was delusional, and I felt like I was living two lives, like in my mind, or in society had deemed me to be, this line of work, which is respected, and I'm held to a higher standard, and, don't you know who I am? And then, inside I'm like a dishonest, like raging alcoholic, you know what I
Right.
mean? And I had to like play these two people, and it just kind of got progressively worse for me, and I just, but like the violence and the chaos, it kind of like went hand in hand in like how my mind and my emotions and my like my inner body felt, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I did that line of work, and I did all kinds of different jobs and different, different assignments and things like that in that line of work. And and I was running around with, people in the department that, were, like, I guess you could say, like, you know they were like good at what they did, but they had a very arrogant, reputation, like
Hmm.
my shit don't stink kind of thing, and
Were
some
they were
people
they,
didn't.
were they unique in that, or was that something? Was that kind of cultural to the department itself?
Mm, it was cultural, and it was also because of like the area or the environment that we worked in. It was like a level 4 prison yard. Some of my supervisors were, were special teams instructors and commanders, and um, just kind of, very arrogant type of personalities, and I could never see that or say that back then. But now that I've been removed from it and I've had a spiritual experience, and I'm essentially a different person than I used to be back then, I call it how it is,
Yeah.
and and that's really what it was like, and I got into, I was always into some shit, like the yard was always going off, so we were always having incidents. I was always a part of use of force. I was always a part of something, and so my name went across the board a lot. um, and then I started, getting in like trouble here and there, like, on and off duty at work, like I ended up getting in a fist fight with one of my coworkers at work, and they investigated that. There were like constant, use of force incidents. And then, I mean, it's a very violent place,
Hmm.
and then I had, in 2012, I got a DUI off duty. And, you're a peace officer, you get in trouble for work for shit like that. And all these things started to happen, where I started to have what they call negative consequences for my behavior and my lifestyle. And so when that happened in 2012, I asked my department if I could get some help, and they were like, "What do you think?" You know what I mean? Like, we're always the last people to know that we have a problem, right?
Right.
And so I ended up, I did my first real attempt at getting sober. I went to treatment. I took a leave of absence from work, and I went to treatment for 30 days, and my department let me go, and I think that they took care of that. And when I got back from that, it was kind of like, when you know you're being dishonest, other people don't know, but deep down what's going on, And I feel like what happened shortly after that, because now I'm like 8 years into my career, 7 years into my career, right?
Okay.
I feel like God was kind of like, you've had a couple chances to get your shit together, and right now your car is going to crash, you know what I mean? And figuratively, right? But it's not going to necessarily be because of the act of drinking, but your car is going to crash, And I didn't see that at the time. But what happened was that I had taken a leave of absence from work to go get sober. I got out of treatment for 30 days. I got out for 30 days. I didn't actually get back to work till like 40, 50 days, right? Because
Mm.
I had like some time off. So between the time that I left treatment and the time that like I'd gotten my shit back together to be able to come back to work, I had already started drinking again and being dishonest. Does that make
Mm.
sense? So
Yeah.
I had 30 days sober. I got out of rehab, started going to AA. And then somewhere in there, I met a girl or something happened, and I was secretly drinking again. So I go back to work, and everyone's like, "Oh, Saeed's back. I got sober. I had a problem. Oh yeah, we know you did. I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're doing better. Oh yeah, for sure." Little did they know that I had already started drinking again.
Right.
And then we had an incident at work, where a SWAT command, this special teams commander, basically him and I were carpooling to work one day, and he had ammunition that he had from work that somebody had given him in his car that was like misplaced but it was in his bag. And so it was in his bag that but the bag was in my personal vehicle, and we went to work together that day. So
Hmm.
without my knowledge, this guy had something in his bag that was unaccounted for, that they were looking for, and I didn't know till after the fact that that was in my car, right? Because how am I
Right.
supposed to know what's in someone's bag? So it's all kind of like a bullshit situation, right? But you understand what I'm trying to say now, where like my car was crashing because of like
Yeah. Yeah.
my
It's
lifestyle and the things that,
the life that you were building
yeah,
was not working. Yeah.
yeah. And so that's why I feel like that was divine intervention at that time, and I just had no idea why my life was completely falling apart, and everything was about to come to a head. And so they initiated an internal affairs investigation, and just like I had described before, it wasn't my first rodeo at an internal affairs investigation. There's an old saying in law enforcement, if you've never been to IA, you probably never done your fucking job. So,
Hmm.
I've been to IA a bunch of times for other shit. But this time I was coming there and I really didn't feel like I did anything wrong.
Sure. Yeah.
But, in long story short, they ended up initiating an internal affairs investigation. And when you're in law enforcement, you get that subpoena with two things on it. It says you're a subject, which means they're investigating you, or they say you're a witness, which they just want to get information from you, right? When I got that subpoena, it said subject, and I'm like, what the
Hmm.
fuck? Like they're investigating me. So
Hmm.
basically, what they thought was that they had a preponderance of evidence, and that since my lieutenant had cop to lying about what he had in his bag, of a story that I didn't know unfold until later on. They thought I was covering up for him. So they had me on conspiracy, failure to report misconduct, and unbecoming of a peace officer. It's 3 charges. But in there, they threw in less than truthful because they thought I was lying for them. That's the only thing that can get you fired in law enforcement. One of many, but it's on the matrix, it's bad. So I'm like, what the fuck? These guys think I'm lying? Like, what am I lying about?
Hmm.
Anyway, so we go through the investigation. They're trying, they want him. They know he's done. They're like, we're just going to wrap this guy up in collateral damage too. And so, and the department that I worked for is known for that, right? And there's all kinds of stuff on the internet about that and other situations. But long story short, I ended up fighting it, which means like it wasn't anything was criminal, it was all administrative, right? But I ended up going to the hearing and telling them that I wanted to fight it, right? So I go across this board, right? It's like a trial with an administrative law judge, my attorney, the department's attorney, and like they're going back and forth, and I'm fighting for my job at this point.
Hmm.
And so we have the trial. I spent all my money on it. I fired my union. I end up hiring outside counsel. The process takes like a year, right?
So the
And then they
burden,
have
I'm assuming, of proof is on you at this point,
no,
right?
from them. The burden of proof is on them. They have the burden of
Gotcha.
proof.
Okay.
And so I end up. My attorney's like, dude, this is bullshit, but we'll see what happens, right? Anyway, so the judge came back, ruled in my favor that I clearly didn't know because of the knowledge. It was my lieutenant's fault. He copped to it. The truth is the truth. And based on his decision, um, I should have been suspended for X amount of time, which time is served, and I should be going back to work with all my back pay. So I'm like thinking to myself, oh, okay, great. Now I'm going to probably go back to work. I'm going to get a bunch of money back. Everything's going to be great. Well, in either party can appeal, right? And at that point, it's who has deeper pockets. So if the state of California is like, oh, well, this guy won, well, you know what? We'll just push it along. The state, they have more money. I'm one person. I didn't have any more money. So I was just kind of like stuck between a rock and a hard place. Now, what I started doing, of course, because of who I am and what I am, I'm an alcoholic. I get that news and I start drinking, right? On a night. I get the news on like the 8th or the 6th of February, and I start drinking all kinds. I have all kinds of. And mind you, I'm like trying to go to AA. I'm trying to go to a 12-step program during all this time while I'm suspended. People think I'm sober. I'm lying about it. Just a dishonest person. and I end up drinking myself to death accidentally, right? So I end up in the hospital on like February 10th or 11th, and my heart failed from a blood alcohol level of 0.54, right?
Yeah.
So they rushed me to the hospital. This all happened at like my best friend's house at the time, who's now my business partner. And they called paramedics. They called, I go to the hospital. They're trying to bring me back. I ended up at a trauma unit in critical care. And long story short, I basically, they brought me back to life from an alcohol poisoning, right?
Hmm.
And so I'm in this hospital room, and I'm intubated. I have all this shit hooked up, like I have a catheter in me. Like, you're on your way out. You know what I mean? I was. And so I just remember waking up and like hearing like all the beep, 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 like your pulse. And like I just looking around, like I can't really move because I'm like kind of sedated. And I'm like, have no idea how I got there. And I can't really move. And I just remember like the nurse being really pissed off um, that that I was there because I was taking the bed up for somebody that could have been really sick.
Mm.
And
As in you were a lost cause anyway. So why the hell are they
yeah, she's like,
spending
you're
resources on
taking
you?
you're an alcoholic, and you're taking a bed up for someone that could be really sick.
Yeah.
And so I was there for like 4 days because they couldn't get a good blood pressure on me, and no one wanted to have anything to do with me. My family didn't want to see me. They were just so disgusted that like once again this guy's lying about drinking. He's in the hospital now, and mind you, this was like my second or third time in the hospital for drinking. Um, and I was just unintentional, but that's how alcoholics are, right? We don't mean to do things, and I remember waking up on like the second or the third day, and I remember seeing the people from the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous like around my bed. And I was
Mm.
just like, what? So those people came to see me because I had built relationships with you. Because mind you, I started going to AA in like 2012. This is 2015 now, right?
Right.
These people are like, this guy's a fucking mess, like he is
I'm assuming that
severe
they know the entire time for those 3 years or whatever as you're building these relationships that you're in and out of the drink,
for sure.
and yeah, so you can't be dishonest with those folks.
Yeah, yeah, but I still was. That's the point. You know
Okay.
what I mean? I was still lying when I could. And I just, and I remember like looking up, and then like I remember like they let me out on like Valentine's Day of 2015. And I remember, there was a guy there that was like he was kind of like my sponsor at the time, but like clearly like I wasn't being honest with this guy. And he took me out of the hospital, and I remember going to his house, and I couldn't go back to my family. My family didn't have nothing to do with me. So I was kind of like I'm like I'm like in transition from my work. I don't really know what's going to happen. I can't go back to work because they want to appeal it. I have no place to go. I'm technically homeless because my family wants to have nothing to do with me. I don't have a job because I'm suspended. My life is in shambles. I have no money. My credit score is screwed. I can't even have a bank account at this point because I'd overdrafted my bank account on some check systems. My life was completely unmanageable,
Yeah.
and so I remember when I was. They were basically finding places for me to stay while they were trying to figure out if I could like go to treatment or something. But so I remember on like on Valentine's Day, that guy Mike, who was my sponsor at the time, or trying to be my sponsor, because I couldn't get honest with him. He gave me $20, and he was like, "Hey, look, like I smoked cigarettes at that time, and he's like, you're gonna need some food. Here's $20. Like we don't know what we're gonna do with you. We're gonna try to get you some help, but you know, um, you just need to hang tight for a couple days, and we're gonna see what we can do." No one would take me because of what they had told me just happened. This guy just got out of the hospital, his heart failed. Like and I own treatment centers now, right? So today I would never take a client like that because I'm like, there's too much liability. Like, what if this guy dies in my place? You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, so back then, all those treatment centers were like, fuck that. We don't want to have nothing to do with this guy. We can't take him. And so here I am, like couch surfing, but like I still have no solution. And I just got out of the hospital. So what do? I just got out of the hospital for drinking myself to death. You would think that, like, you would be some type of a wake up call. So what I do with that $20, I bought vodka with it, right?
Mm.
So I just got out of the hospital from dying from drinking, and here I am, I'm drinking again, and I'm like couch surfing at people's houses from a 12-step program, right? So I remember like it's like the 15th or the 16th, and I didn't get sober until the 17th, right? So the 16th to the 17th, I remember I left this guy's house who was a sober member of AA. I walked to the liquor store. I bought a pint of vodka and I bought a Gatorade and I dumped out half the Gatorade and I poured the pint in there. And I remember walking back to this guy's house and and I remember like having my phone and it was like an Android at the time. And I remember I had like one bar and like clearly I hadn't been paying the bill, so like I'm surprised the phone still worked, right? And and then I remember I called that same guy Mike again, right? And I was like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? And it was like I didn't need to tell him that I had already started drinking, but he knew I already started drinking. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And he was just very matter of fact, and he just said, he's like, Jamil, what we're doing here doesn't seem to be working. I've been trying to help you for like 3.5 years. I know your family. I know everything there is to know about you. You got this identity that you think you're a cop, but you're a raging alcoholic. Like you're not going to be able to do anything unless you quit drinking. Like even if that shit works out and you go back to being, you know, a knuckle dragging fucking gun slinging fucking cop that you are, whatever the hell you want to call it. He's like, you're not going to be able to do anything successfully in life until you figure this drinking thing out. And so, but he's like, but what we're doing isn't working. And I can't have the conscience of you dying on me. So he's like, I don't want to tell your family. I don't want to look at your family at your funeral, all kinds of shit. So he's like, but there's another guy and his name is Matt. And I think that you should call him because maybe he can help you.
Mm.
And Matt's just another guy in AA that's kind of known for helping like the worst of the worst guys get sober, right? Like he's a fucking asshole. He's like super hardcore. He's like at that time he had 20 years sober, but he's just a dick. And like, but for some reason, like the bottom of the bottom, bro, like the shittiest low bottom, hopeless alcoholics end up being sponsored by this guy, and for some reason they end up getting sober. So he was like basically firing me and passing me on to this other guy. And I knew who he was. And I didn't like him. And we got into it many a times in the past, right? And I hated this guy so much that I literally wanted to physically fight him at AA meetings in the past, right?
Mm.
Because that's the kind of guy I was,
Was he just like is that how he just came off, or was there just a direct altercation that caused you to feel that, or you
No,
just
no,
didn't
no.
like him?
No. I just didn't like him, and he was very, very. Everything that he said was right, but he was such a prick.
Mm.
And he was just like he has this arrogance about him, but he was like always right. And he'd been sober a long time, and he's helped so many people. So it's like even though he was like a fucking asshole and an arrogant guy, he just helped thousands of people over the years. That like he just has like good things always happening to him because he's helping people, bro. Saving people's lives.
Yeah.
But I didn't like him. I was the problem, not him. You know what I mean? And so he knew who I was. I knew who he was. We both knew. He knew I didn't like him, but he didn't care. And so he was like, I think you should call Matt. So I'm like, oh God, this is terrible, right? And I'm drinking at this time, and I remember I'm in the front porch of like this sober guy's house. And I'm like, dude, I have no other options in life right now. So maybe like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, right? So I have this
Mm-hmm.
guy's number. I've had his number. So I call him. And I'm like, yo, dude, like Mike told me to call you, and he's like, okay, and and I'm just like, do you think you could help me get sober? And he's like, and he like asked me one simple question, and he's like, are you willing to go to any lengths to stay sober? And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, are you willing to go to any lengths to stay sober? And I was like, I think so. I was like, to be honest with you, bro, I just want to like not drink vodka at 5 o'clock in the morning and stop shaking and fucking throwing up every morning. Like I physically just wanted to not be dependent on booze at the time. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
all I wanted. Like when you got if you asked me what I wanted when I got sober, I would tell you I want to be able to not drink vodka in the morning because I want to not have to. You get what I'm saying? And I want to like, cause like even if I did drink in the morning, I would like be shaking just to drink, and then I would throw up the first fucking shot because my body would reject it. I'd drink another one. I'd just try to keep it down, and once I kept it down long enough for it to get into my body, I was okay again. You know what I mean? And I really just wanted to like that to end for every fucking day, you know? That because that's
Hmm.
how it was when I started drinking. I had like DTs. I was like fully dependent on alcohol, which is like why I kept drinking through all this bad stuff happening. And so, just like dry heaving, vomit. It was terrible, bro. And I literally I went through a lot of the same things that I felt like an opiate heroin addict went through because I see them all the time in my place. I'm like, damn, I felt just like that with booze. And and he was like, okay, well, he was like, I think you're a garden variety alcoholic. I think you're so sick and so fucked up that I don't even think you can stay sober long enough for AA to work for you. Like, you need to go to a place and you need to get dried out. You need to be in a place where you can't access alcohol because you can't leave. You know what I mean? And so she's telling me about detox and rehab, basically, right?
Which you've already been through.
Which I had been through in like different times and like not really serious, but like, and but he's like, I think that's what you should do. And that's my direction to you. And when you get there and you get all checked in, I don't know how you're gonna do that, what you're gonna do to get there, but when you get there, call me. So he's basically telling me, like, do that and we'll talk. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm like, okay, so then I call my mom, and my mom had ran and owned and operated drug and alcohol treatment centers for the last 15 years. So she's seen my demise and rise and everything. And I was just an arrogant prick, and I was better than everybody. So I called her one last time and I asked her, and she answered. I remember it was like 10 o'clock at night on like the 15th of February. And I told her, I said, do you think you could help me get sober? And she was like, oh my God, you're still alive. And
Mm.
I was just like, And I was like, yeah. And she's like, okay, well, let me try to make some phone calls and I'll get back to you. So I'm like, okay. So then, I'm still drinking because I need to drink. So she calls me back like 2 hours later and she's like, hey, I found a scholarship bed for you. A scholarship bed means that I basically called in a $30,000 favor for you. I asked somebody that's my homie to give you a free bed at their treatment center
Wow.
and with no fucking insurance or money. So I was like, at the time, I didn't even realize what a gift that was. I was just like, oh, okay, great, thank you. And she's like, I'll pick you up at 10 a.m. Where are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm at so and so's house. Just meet me on the corner of X Street. Like, my mom literally drove up. I came running out. And I got in the car like I got a fucking street urchin, you know. And I remember like waking up that morning and be like, oh, I gotta get some booze. Like I can't go to rehab without drinking because now I'm shaking again. So I don't know how, but I ended up finding like a half a pint and I drank just to feel better again. And I go to rehab and that's where the rubber met the road, man. I got there and, I blew a .24 and my mom was like, you're drinking. And I was like, I had to. And,
Yeah.
that's kind of where it started for me. So, I started my detox there. And that same night, I had a seizure because they didn't realize. I kind of lied about like exactly how bad I was because you can't tell them how fucked up you are. They don't want to take you, and especially like no money. Like why would they want that liability? So anyway, so I'm lying in bed there, and I end up having a seizure, and they call 911, and they take me to the hospital again. So I end up in Hoag Hospital in Newport Beach again. So it's my second time in a hospital in a week. And I'm just like, fuck, just get this shit out of me so I can just start my journey. Like,
Yeah.
and so I ended up staying there overnight, and the next day they let me go and they prescribed me Librium, and I was on that medication for like the month. But yeah, and that's where it started, and I stayed in rehab for 60 days, 90 days, and I got out and I was ready, and I was desperate, and I was hungry, and in there I don't know what happened, but I kind of realized like I didn't know how to live anymore, but I didn't want to die and and I wanted to be successful, and
Yeah.
I was ready to do it all. And it didn't happen that quick for me. I ended up getting out of there, and after I got out of there, I went to a lot of meetings. I went to a lot of 12-step stuff. I did a lot of fellowship. I was just my entire existence and life was Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't fucking do anything besides that. Like my day consisted of, oh, what meeting are we going to tonight? I got into
Were
a
you were you
fellowship,
co-
and that
were you of the mindset where it's just like I'm gonna overcompensate for all the shit that I have done leading up to this, or were you just like legitimately on a path where you're like I'm just gonna pour every last drop of myself into this new pathway because I know what the alternative looks like.
yeah, I was just desperate, bro. I was desperate. And in that moment, dying scared me enough, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And I realized like, oh my God, I haven't done enough. Like I would have died an alcoholic deck and nobody would have known who I was, like fucking after my funeral. You know what I mean? And I wasn't even like active cop at the time. I was suspended, so it's not like I would have gotten like a 21 gun salute funeral or anything.
right.
And and so, and there were moments in my career where I wanted to kill myself. I thought about it because I was just such a severe alcoholic. I couldn't see the end. But I ended up, I just got really, really busy. And like I said, it was the gift of desperation, is really what I had, and I wanted to live life. I wanted to become successful. I wanted to make money. I wanted to be rich. I wanted to help a lot of people. And I and and I wanted to. I just didn't want to be a loser at life anymore. That's really what I was, bro. And it's just shameful, and so I just and I didn't have any other option. I didn't have anything else going on for me. And so, I kind of just did that. I did that for like my first year. I started sponsoring guys in AA real young in sobriety. I ended up sponsoring this guy that killed somebody in a car accident, and he ended up going to prison. And my sponsor Matt made me go watch this guy get sentenced because I was like, no, I can't go to court and fucking watch this guy go get sentenced. I used to be a cop. I can't fucking do that. And he's like, you know what? That's exactly what you're gonna do. And
Mm,
and so I had to go do that, and I had to like tell him goodbye, but like I had to like look at him from like a different perspective. Like I wasn't a cop, like in court. I was a fucking guy trying to help a guy that had been trying to get sober, but now he's going to prison for life. You know, um, I sponsored a lot of people that like didn't end up staying sober, that ended up dying of overdoses and getting shot, all kinds of shit. So I got to see really early on, like if you decide to go back, this is gonna be what's gonna happen. And and then I was unemployable. I couldn't get a job for a long time. I was you know, I um I was like I came from like being that line of work, making six figures a year, but not being educated. So every job I applied for, I wouldn't get. They would see peace officer and they'd probably be like, fuck this guy, we're not gonna hire a cop. And even entry level jobs that I finally was like, oh, I'm gonna go to nursing school. I could probably make as much money as being a cop as being a nurse. So I went into a nursing program, and then finally I applied to Hoag Hospital, that same hospital that helped me like detox.
yeah.
I applied online like 92 times for entry level jobs, and finally they called me, and this guy, I remember his name was like Chad something. He's still my friend on Facebook, but and I remember he called me and he's like, hey dude, you're like filled out a lot of applications on here. Like, I'm just calling you because like I just seen your name so many times. Why don't you come in for an interview? We have like an ER tech job opening, but like you've like this decorated cop, bro. Like, what the fuck are you gonna do here? And I'm like, oh man, I'm in nursing school. I just need an entry level job. I need to learn I just need some experience. I was just happy to get a job. And so I ended up going in for an interview and they gave me a job. So here I am, like, just being this nobody worker amongst workers, just kind of wheeling people around and just being, and I realized like early on that like I had no bedside manner and like I wasn't nice enough to be a nurse, you know, and and I just fucking didn't like it. It wasn't even the blood or anything. Like the gory shit didn't bother me. You know what I mean? I've cleaned up bodies, freaking heads blown off, hanging off, multiple stab wounds. Like that type of stuff didn't bother me. It was just like I didn't know how to be that nice to people. You know what I mean? And and I was just like, fuck this, I can't do that. And I hadn't really like had a spiritual experience yet. I was still working the steps, and I was a pretty sick guy, and mentally and emotionally. And I ended up just quitting nursing school one day in the middle of a lecture. I walked out and the teacher was like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "I quit." And that was the only thing I quit in life. And I remember walking down to the admissions office, and I was like, "Hey, I quit. Whatever my tuition and shit is, I'll figure it out later. But I'm gonna go figure out how to be an entrepreneur. Fuck it." And she was like, and I just started my side hustle, which was like my sober living home, my first sober living home. I was just trying to get help. I was trying to help alcoholics get sober. You know what I mean? I want to
Well,
help people get.
let's pause there because I want to spend some time in that space as well because I feel like that's like the chapter that begins maybe where you are now. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode. If you are, we'd really love it if you could leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcast or a rating on Spotify. And of course, please feel free to invite somebody into the conversation. If you feel like you have a story to share on the podcast, why not apply to be a guest? You can do so by completing the form on the podcast description or find it on stackanddays.com. That's stackndays.com. But for now, let's jump back into the conversation. But you keep referencing this like this spiritual experience that you had, this awakening that you had. Like I feel like you've had obviously a multi-layered life, right? The shit has been, you know, dark as hell in certain aspects. You've seen a bunch. I feel like even in your adult years, you were just coming in and out of constant trauma, right?
Mhm.
You've got your youth that, you know, that, and, you know, your father, your mom, there's just so much wrapped up into it. How did you start kind of going inside past like the program that you were on and start shifting who you were as a person? And did that coincide with this kind of spiritual experience that you had as you're now starting to identify who you want to be as a person in the world as well?
Yeah, yeah. So the spiritual experience happens when you complete the 12 steps of the program, right? That they
Okay.
call that the spiritual experience. And then there's a bunch of steps. There's 12 of them, right? And in there, I don't know if you know anything about them, but there's a lot of things that you have to do, a lot of writing. You have to like, go back, you have to like admit your faults. You have to like find out what your character defects and shortcomings are. You have to like make a list of people that you had harmed. You have to go to all those people and apologize for your actions and ask them what you can do to make it right. And some of those people are like, fuck you. I never want to see you again. Don't even call me. And you have to deal with that, or you have to like do what they ask you to do. And then you have to like, figure out like how you have a spiritual relationship with God or your higher power or whatever it is that you choose to have. Right. It doesn't preach any specific one. And then you have to like give that away to people and you have to like help other people get sober too and work the steps. So you have to like start the cycle again. And that's a spiritual experience. You can't have any of that unless you complete it. And so, and you become, it's the ultimate personal development thing you can do. I don't care what anyone says. Do the 12 steps. That is the ultimate personal development um, transformation you can do. And I was like very much into fitness, so I tried to like get better, physically as well. Um, but that is what I'm referring to, and and through that you get to understand what they say, the truths about your life, about yourself. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
you get to peel away at the onion, and you get to figure out why you are the way you are and and what you can do to make it better, right? And so if because alcoholics are mentally and bodily different than other people, right?
Yeah.
And
What
so
were some of those? What were some of those truths for you that like that was just so glaring for you over the course of that process that you're just like, oh
mm,
shit.
yeah, well, I'm self-centered, I'm egotistical, I'm selfish, um and I don't really care about anything that doesn't benefit me.
Mm,
That's pretty much the average description of an alcoholic or a drug addict. Um, it doesn't make me like less than anybody. It just means that like um, now that I found out the truths of myself, I'm equipped to know what to do to um, make it better, right? And to what you do to make it better or to be a better person is contrary action to all those things, right? Which is, have a constant contact with the higher power of God and, try to help people and, you know, um, pay it forward and, make restitution and things like that, right? And so you can't you can't do any of those things unless you figure out what they are, right? And so that's
Hmm.
why, I try to, my entire business is centered around helping people, whether it's in fitness or in drug and alcohol treatment or sober living. Which is why I try to do like a lot of charity stuff. I try to, um, you know, and just, be an example, and show people hope, and be like a good example of somebody that's sober. Not all people like, try to like be overachievers. Sometimes, just because, I chose that I wanted to, try to become a multimillionaire and try to help people and do all this shit and build a company and like, be known for what I've tried. It's all about, you become relevant by what you've done for people, in my opinion, right? Like money's a byproduct of bringing value to people. That's the problem with people. You can't expect just to make money. You need to be valuable to people, right? And so, what we do is, we're in the business of helping people get sober and stay sober, or provide them the living conditions and structure for that, right?
Yep.
And so, um, my, I could never like pay back Alcoholics Anonymous for what it's done for me personally. So that's why I just try to like, help other people, you know. Um, but that's really what the program is, and so for me, I wasn't trying to make this call about that, but that's just what helped me. You know what I mean? And
No.
so, um, and for me, it's like, that was the only solution that worked for me.
What's your so you've discovered that you want to be an entrepreneur. Was your first kind of entry point into that world you opening up sober and recovery
Yeah,
centers,
yeah.
or
So
what, like
so
what?
so so I wanted. So I opened up. So I always had the dream to become a treatment center owner. Treatment center owner costs a minimum of 7 figures, right? You need $1 million to start it. I didn't have that. So I was like, oh, okay, I can start backwards, right? So I can start with the lowest level of care and try to build it up, right? So that's what I did. So I ended up renting a sober living home, just one little shitty old house, with 6 beds, and we ended up, you know, um, building it up, building it up. I met different, investors along the way. Went from one house to two houses, three houses. I met, when I got my third house, I met an old white Italian guy, and he was just like this old dude, and he was like, he just beat cancer, and his son died of a heroin overdose, and he like came up to me, and he's like, "Look, I know what you're doing. I want you to duplicate your business, create a home in memory of my son. I'm gonna pay for everything. You just run the business, and I'll take care of the money." And I was like, "Who the fuck's this guy? Like, what's the catch?" And he was a good dude, and he just wanted to help people, and he bought me 3 houses, and he just said, just pay me on the real estate, and you can run the business, and when I die, you can buy this shit for my family.
Mm,
And that's what happened, and literally we're in escrow right now to do that.
congrats.
I had to find another investor to help me buy it because it's just a lot of money to come up with in like 13, 14 days. Um, but I ended up meeting him, and then obviously I'm staying sober, right? And then I also own another business, which is a gym. I'm in the franchise gym business where I'm a franchisee, and I own a gym territory, and so I met a lot of people through there, and then I ended up meeting one of my investors that invested in the medical side of my business, right? And he basically dumped 7 figures into this new company that we created, which is now doing the medical treatment. So now went from a sober living to now being a drug and alcohol treatment, right, center. And then,
Mm,
we opened up outpatient. So we're completely vertically integrated now. We have like 12 locations, 75 beds. We have government contracts. I'm also a re-entry provider. So it's kind of weird how this happened, but I am a transitional provider for inmates that have drug and alcohol offenses that go to prison. So
okay.
if they want, they come out of out of prison or in an institution, and they can come to one of my programs and get treatment and as a part of their parole, and then they
Hmm.
can go on. So but like I have a lot of experience working with inmates. You know what I mean? Like I
How do how
what
do they how do they find you? Is that something like would they
it's
would have
come
to
straight. It's a contract, and it comes straight through the contract,
got you?
and it's voluntary.
Okay. Okay. When you were first kind of getting into this, and you're renting the first home, and you're starting from the back, and you're moving the other way. and you don't have, the $1 million to start this out. You had the vision, I'm assuming, right? Like how did you kind of curate a concept to scale this desire to help within this space the way that
Hmm.
you ultimately have? Because I mean, you've been sober now for, was it 8, 9 years?
Nine 9 years, yeah, 9 years.
9 years. I'm assuming the first couple of years you're still trying to figure yourself out. You get into entrepreneurialism, and so how long have you been in business? And did you have that vision going into business to kind of you kind of increase the scale and the speed to which you kind of get to where you are today?
No, no,
Obviously, you had some things work out for you, but at the same time, you had to have a sense of like what you wanted to do and how you wanted to put it together.
yeah, I had really no idea what the fuck I was doing, to be honest with you. I just knew that I
Okay.
wanted to help people, and we just kind of figured it out along the way. We're still figuring it out. I met a lot of people along the way that that I learned from. I most recently in the last like year and a half, I met this multi-millionaire, nine-figure guy. He sold his business. He sold his drug and alcohol treatment center for like almost $200 million a couple of
Yeah.
years ago, and he's like a sober guy in AA like me. That's how I met him. I met him on social media, but he got sober the same way like I did. And he built a business. I was like, dude, this is the only guy that's done what my dream is. And I ended up getting in contact with him, and I ended up, getting some coaching, mentoringship from him. And, I built a relationship as a friend with him. And, he's helped me a lot. And we have a lot of things in the works that potentially could be really life changing for me in, business. Um, but yeah, I've learned a lot from him, and it's just like it's literally just like staying sober and like doing the right thing and making connections with people, and one thing led to another. But I had this idea and this vision in my head that I still do, and I don't really know how I'm gonna get there, but I have like I figure it out along the way. Like now to get to this big business stage from like a seven-figure earner to like a potential 8 to 9 figure earner, what I do know is that this guy I just told you about, he knows what to do.
Yeah.
And I can learn a lot from him. You know what I mean? And so, maybe that's why I met him. You know what I mean? And so, um, he's introduced me to a lot of people, but what I'm saying is it's literally like the stupidest thing you hear, like in sobriety, where you're just like, oh, you should just stay sober and it'll work itself out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's really like the only thing that I can say has been pretty accurate. You just stay sober and it'll figure itself out. There's an old saying in sobriety, God helps drunks that don't drink, you know?
Mhm.
And and maybe that's really what I got going for myself. I don't know. But I don't really think that I don't really think I'm that good. That's the thing. I think on paper, on social media, or some of the, because of like the things that I've like acquired, material, or like the built stuff that I've built. I mean, yeah, to the outside, but to be honest with you, I don't even think I've even done anything really that, because like my goals are big, bro. Like I wanna have a big exit, like I wanna I wanna own the plane that I used to fucking clean, bro, when I was a janitor at 15 years old. You know what I'm saying? Um, those are material things, but those are things that keep you going in business, and I really want to build something that has a reputation, like a household name known for helping people in a certain space, whether that space is we help people that are, you know, transitioning from being incarcerated to, having we're shifting society by they're becoming productive members of society. They're not going back to prison, but they're like paying taxes and like trying to help people now too,
Mhm.
or just a big treatment center. I don't really know um, how exactly that is going to pan out, but I know that if I stay sober and I stay alive, it should probably work itself out.
Yeah, I mean, you also have the example of your most recent past behavior showing that, so long as you stay the path, good things are going to happen. And you're also, like, I'm sure, working your ass off, you're hustling, you know what I mean. You're showing up in the spaces that you need to. You're taking bets, you're taking risks, and you're pushing. Sounds like you're pushing things, all the way to the limit. I think I was watching something you had posted recently where you were talking about that window of time where you had to kind of come up with the capital in order to to move into escrow for these three properties that sounds like is the next stage of your business. I mean, and that sounds like it was, you were just pushing that thing right up to the limit to
Yeah, yeah.
do.
I just have to figure. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, yeah, I had to figure out how. See, my business is already in it and it's already operating, right? So if I lose the real estate, I lose the business. Can't. So I
Right.
have to keep the real estate so I can keep the business, so I can keep the control, right? Because someone else comes in, who knows what happens. So I have to acquire. That's one thing that I've learned along, and I've learned a lot this from this guy Eric I'm telling you about. Where like the real estate is just as important as the business in what we're doing, how to lock
Yeah.
up the real estate and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So, um, I try to, remain coachable, and I don't really like try to toot my horn about things that I'm good at, but I think what I can honestly say is that I think I am good at is that I'm very persistent, and I don't like to take no for an answer, and I feel like I'm a decent relationship builder with people
Mm.
in business. Because I try not to keep things transactional. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Sometimes it has to be transactional to get to the door. Um, but after that, it's all about proximity and getting in the right rooms, and being authentic. And I think
Yep.
that that's what's most important. If someone's like, trying to figure out, if they want, if you're an alcoholic or a drug addict, you got to figure that part out first. You got to get sober. Because none of that's just going to happen, for me if I didn't do that. So, I think that for myself, the basics are what I learned, in sobriety, for me. But I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, right? Normal people aren't like that, so they don't have to.
But you know what? I mean, I think one of your, from just having opportunity to sit down here and chat with you for a while, one of the strengths that are clear to me is you have a very clear idea and understanding as to who you are, right? And I think that comes through the work that you've done, through probably your program initially, but you're still doing that work, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you have a clear idea of how you're showing up, what your strengths are, what you need to work on, and you're okay with a little bit of ambiguity so long as you have the faith in in the direction that you want to move in. So I love that, man. I really do appreciate everything that you were able to share with us today. I think it's fantastic, and I'm going to continue to be a spectator from the outside of your story and the things that you're sharing. And I think what you got going on is fantastic, and to hear firsthand where you've come from, brother. I mean, hats off to you, man.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate that, man. I'm not too sure who your audience. I know I have an idea of who your audience is, but I hope that people that might have an alcohol or a substance abuse problem, really, realize that, if that's what they have, then, there's a solution to their problem, and there's lots of help and resources, they can even hit me up. But I'm just saying that, if you can find out, what your, what your, what your problem is, then there's a
Yeah.
solution to that, and there's a lot that like you can do from there.
What I mean, I'll ask you one last question because I know you got a roll. But for that person who's sitting there trying to figure out, okay, they're sitting there saying to themselves, "I got a problem here. I need to address." And obviously, we got to take into the some folks need medical attention in order to do things safely. But in your line of the work, you see this all every day, all day. What would you suggest to that person be the first step that they take in order to move in another direction?
I think the first step that I would tell them is, are you having negative consequences to your life mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, or financially, from drugs and alcohol? Um, and, if you do, um, I think that you should ask yourself is once you start, can you stop? And
Hmm.
if you don't know, then that's a good indicator. But normal people don't ask themselves if they think they have a problem. It just doesn't happen like
Yeah.
that. You
If
know what
you're
I
asking
mean?
yourself that question, then
Yeah,
it's
for
telling.
sure. But negative consequences. And keep in mind, we're always the last people to know.
Yeah.
You know, and so they say all the time. Only an alcoholic can call himself an alcoholic. If you say you are, you are. But no
Yep.
one is uniquely qualified to help you more than another alcoholic. So if you're going to a normal person for help, they're not going to be able to understand you.
They don't get it necessarily, right?
Alcoholics and drug addicts are uniquely qualified to help other alcoholics and drug addicts.
So find somebody who's uniquely qualified to help you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Look, Jamil, man, I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank you,
spending some
bro.
time on Stacking Days. I hope we stay in contact. Like
For
I said, I'm
sure.
going to continue to watch your journey from the outside, man. And, all the blessings in the world hopefully come your way. And hopefully one day you're riding in that plane, man.
Yeah. King Air 300 is my first one. 350, hopefully.
There you go, brother.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
look, I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
All right, bro.
You got it. Everyone, Stacking Days will be back next week with another episode. I'm going to sit back and probably re-listen to this episode once again right after I get off of this, because I think Jamil, he just gave us so much to work with. So with that being said, we'll see y'all next time. Appreciate it. I appreciate you guys listening to the Stacking Days podcast. I hope this episode added value to your recovery and wellness journey. Before we go our separate ways, let's connect on social. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Stacking Days or via the website www.stackingdays.com. By supporting the show, you can play a direct role in amplifying people of color in their pursuit of recovery. The easiest way to do that is to subscribe or hit the follow button. This way, you'll never miss an episode, all while playing an active part in creating the ecosystem where diverse voices in healing matter. This show is for the purpose of education and connection and is not a replacement for therapy or recovery care. For more information on the resources and support available, take a look at SAMHSA and some other resources shared in the description. Until we meet again, be well, one day at a time.